Hi everyone, welcome to Olive City Homestead. I'm Kim. In today's video we're going to talk about lavender, and specifically we're going to talk about taking lavender volunteer seedlings out of the ground and planting them to create new plants. It's so easy and so rewarding. Now, there are three kinds of lavender. The most common is English lavender, and it's probably, definitely, the most fragrant one of all. But the other two, French lavender and Spanish lavender, are not perhaps as well known, but they are wonderful. So all the lavenders are originally from the Mediterranean area, and their names sort of commingled back in the day. And so there is a little confusion between Spanish lavender and French lavender. So yeah, sometimes Spanish lavender is actually French and vice versa. The difference is, and I won't be pronouncing the Latin names correctly probably, but you should probably be able to figure it out. Lavandula stoicus, something like that. That is Spanish lavender, and Lavandula dentata is French lavender. The difference in the looks, though, is quite a bit. The Spanish lavender, which is what I have, is a dark purple pineapple-like bloom, and on the top are very distinctive, what sometimes are called rabbit ears. Also more, I think, nicely known as butterfly lavender or the butterfly top. The dentata has a more grayish green appearance rather than, and it has a dented flower on top. So it looks quite a bit different actually, although all three of those lavenders in a way look very similar from a distance especially. The Spanish lavender also has what is commonly thought of as an evergreen scent, and it is, as I mentioned before, a little lighter than the English lavender in aroma, but all of the lavenders make wonderful aromatherapy type projects, such as sachets for your dryer or for your clothes drawer, potpourri, essential oils, many things like that, and some people do even use it for cooking. Now, I've had my mother plant, as I call it, my lavender, my big lavender plant for, I think, about 5 years now. That's about right. I got it and planted it as a little tiny, like 3 or 4 inch start at the big box store. And it was one of the very first plants I actually bought and planted here in a container. After I moved here. I moved here 7 years ago, and when I came here, the only flowers here were a few rose bushes, very old ones, and a few geraniums that I really wasn't a big fan of the color, the bright red, and a little bit of dianthus in a few pots. That's it. The rest of the place, 2.5 acres, was 100-year-old olive trees and Bermuda grass. And I did not have a history of being successful with houseplants. The few times I had tried it over the years, they had completely died. So I wasn't about to start that. But the front yard area of the property right in front of the house looked a little bare. And so when I saw the lavender at the store one day, I thought, that's what I want. That's what I love. So I bought it. Put it in a pot, and it grew. In fact, the next year, instead of being a little 3 or 4 inches, it had bushed out quite a bit. And I thought, well, that's great. I didn't really even do anything to it. I barely watered it, and it bloomed beautifully. And I really didn't, at that point, I hadn't started even thinking of growing more flowers or vegetable gardens or an orchard or anything. But that was the year I started looking into it. And so I discovered that I probably needed to put that lavender plant in the ground because it was going to get stunted if I left it in that pot. So I planted it in the ground, and the rest is history. It has taken off and become this massive bush. It's much more impressive in the spring, summer, and fall or early fall than it is throughout the winter. You know, obviously most plants, flowering perennial plants, are dormant in the winter. The grayish, greenish foliage of the lavender plant is basically a match for my olive tree leaves, which I personally like, but it's not too flashy. But it is wonderfully aromatic all year round. So what I discovered, though, this summer, and you know, it probably was the case last year too, I just didn't notice it because I was maybe busier, or maybe I did notice it, but I thought that's a lot of work, so I didn't attempt to do anything about it. But this year I said I'm definitely going to do something about it, and that is all the volunteer seedlings that came up all around the lavender mother plant. We'll go take a look now. So this is my Spanish lavender. It is about I'd say 5 feet wide, maybe a little more than that, and about 2.5 feet tall right in the center. And look what we have right here. So we have little seedlings all around the mother plant. And when I first looked at this, I thought there were maybe a couple dozen here. But I spent a few minutes digging up a few, and what I've discovered is that this looks like it's a little bush, but actually it's several separate plants. So basically when you dig underneath them and you think you're going to pull out one, it tends to be 2, 3, 4. So I'm revising my estimate of how many there are to be more like, I'd say more like 100, because when you actually start looking, there's a lot, and they actually spread out quite a ways where the water probably washed the seeds farther down. I still have the dead blossoms to deadhead, and they're very dry right now. They look like a pineapple, and you can still see a vestige of the rabbit ears that was on the top there. Now on this side of the plant, you can see that I have already deadheaded all of the dead blooms. I have not pruned this back, which most people do. I have not yet done that, and this plant is 5 years old, and that's why it's so wide. And I'm not opposed to pruning it back. If and when I need to, I will reassess in the spring. But right now, what I do is this plant blooms, as you saw in that opening video, beautifully early in the spring, March usually, maybe even the end of February. I'd have to look back at my dates. But then I deadhead all of those, and it blooms again. Every year it blooms twice so far. It doesn't have to. A lot of lavender plants don't, but in my particular climate, zone 9B, and with this particular Spanish lavender plant, it does so far bloom every year twice. And usually after the second bloom, I deadhead it. But this year, I would just come by and, deadhead a little section. And then the next week, I would come by and deadhead another section. And you can see them. They're all down here. But I still need to do the side over here. But you see, it doesn't stop the new growth from coming up. So I can do that over the winter and it will be fine. In the spring, it will bloom gloriously again. It is a plant that needs so little care, and it's in a spot it likes because lavender likes very well draining soil. And although a lot of my soil around here is clay, I also have a good deal of sand mixed in, and this is on a slope, and this is very well draining. And apparently quite conducive to seedlings. So I'm going to dig some more of these up and see how many we end up with. But I'm really looking forward to planting lavender all over the front of my property, where right now it's just open dry grass along the easement. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Right down there by that horse fence line, it's just open dry grass. That's at the end of a very hot 115-degree dry summer. That's what we get here. Now way back there to the east is mountains. It's kind of covered today in a little bit of overcast clouds, which is unusual for us, but it is mid-November. So these are the first 3 I've taken, and you can see we have small ones, medium ones, and some good solid large ones. But I think that they're going to all do great because they all had fabulous root systems. That's one great thing about lavender. They have very strong root systems. See, these are 2 that very tiny when they showed up above the ground, and when I dug them out, look at that root system. It's pretty complex, and there's quite a lot of it. So with the ones that are this tiny, which these are about not even an inch, the greenery, I'm probably going to plant in a crate, a large container, a whole bunch of them, all the ones that are this small. And then the ones that are a little bigger, say this size, which is about 2 inches or larger, will get their own pots. So I'm going to start digging now, and you know, it's about as simple can be. You can use a big shovel, or you can just scrape back the area around with one of these little shovels and use it. And a lot will depend on how dry or wet your soil is. It's, I told you, it sprinkled yesterday, so my soil is pretty loose. And here we go. There is the root system on this plant. It is really long. I mean, let me lay this down so you can see it. So this plant's about 1.5 inches of greenery. And then there's about, I'd say 3.5 inches of roots. So that's going to get its own. I know it's only 1.5 inches. I said 2 inches, but that's going to get its own pot, because with that massive root system, it's going to grow crazy over the winter, I think. Because our winters are so mild, it'll just keep growing. All right, well, I have a lot of digging to do. But this is not a hard process. It's very simple. It's just a little time consuming, kind of like deadheading the lavender. Not hard, just takes a little bit of time. But what you can do is you can just do it a little bit at a time. That's one of my mottos, you know, to tackle garden chores just a little bit at a time. So I can do a little bit now, maybe for half an hour while I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook or a YouTube video. And then maybe I come out in the morning and do a half an hour. And then I come out tomorrow at lunch and do a half an hour. And you know what? In a couple of days, it will be done. You know, just make sure you go down vertically quite a bit before you turn your shovel in toward the plant, so you don't cut through the roots. But I'm finding, because I've watered this in, regularly the last couple of weeks, knowing I was going to do this, and then it did rain a little bit, the ground is really soft enough that these things are just pulling up super, super easy. Look at this one. It's a big, huge plant with a great solid root. So that's going to be in a bigger pot, I think. Got a couple of those. Another thing you could do is you could use a large shovel, if you were very careful, and come at it and dig up a bunch at one time. I might try that. But this is going pretty fast, so I'm not sure that, you know, I see the need to do that. I'm pretty excited. We're going to have a lot of new lavender plants for free, and of a variety that I know will do well. And that's the greatest thing about volunteer plants, is that they already are used to your climate. They like to grow where you live. They like it as their home. They've already proven that. And so they're going to do well for you. All right, so in just 10 minutes, I have dug up that little section of ground. It's about 18 inches by 18 inches, approximately. And I have all those starts already. I have so much more to go, but I'm curious how many I've got here. I'm going to count them. Oh my goodness, that's 120 seedlings. That little section right there, 120. Okay, guys, I am totally revising yet again my estimate. I think now, not dozens and not 100. I think 300. I'm guessing 300 seedlings is what I'm going to get here. Which means I can't do it all today because I don't have all the pots and soil out here to accommodate 300 seedlings. And it's getting kind of chilly. It's getting down into the low 50s, I think, now, and I'm starting to lose the light. So what I'm going to do is pot up what I've got, these 120, and I might even have to double pot some of them. And then I'm going to close this video up at that point after showing you what those starts look like. I'll pot it up. And then I'm going to do a part 2 In a week or week and a half, when I finish getting all of these that I'm going to pot done, I will come back and show you. Because what I'm going to do is an experiment. I'm going to put some in my grow room that I'm just now starting. And so in part 2 of this lavender seedling video series, I'm going to show you my new grow room I've started. And then I'm also going to put some in my backyard under my covered patio. And then I'm going to leave some in the ground here next to the mother plant. And I'm going to leave a few containers next to the mother plant out here. And that way, with 4 different growing environments, we'll see which does the best or if they all do well. I have a feeling they all should do pretty well. If I have nights that are going to get below freezing, we usually have a few during the winter. In fact, amazingly, we've had 2 already. In November, we had 2 nights where it got down to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, which is unheard of to have that happen in November. It usually happens a few times a year, but in January or February. But anyway, I can always bring them in if I'm concerned, but I'm actually thinking of doing the experiment pretty hardcore and just leave them out here and see if they survive. But the bulk of them I'm going to have in my grow room so that they can just really flourish over the winter, and then in the spring I can plant them. So I just wanted to show you how I'm planting one of these, just so you see how simple it is. I'm using a good potting soil, but not an expensive one, just a basic one from the local hardware store that I've had good success with. I do not get expensive potting soils, but I make sure to get good ones that don't have things in them they shouldn't have. And so this one cost me $6 for the 1.5 quart bag, a really good deal. So I've decided to plant 2 in each pot. I'm not using rooting hormone because, as I mentioned before, the lavender have good root systems. They're really strong, and these have, all the ones I've dug up do have that. So they don't need any rooting hormone on them. You can just go ahead and gently put them in. I suggest putting them in, filling the pot with about 1/4 of the soil you're going to use, then putting in the seedlings, and then adding the rest of the soil around them. That's the easiest way to do it. And that's all there is to it. This is now potted up. You could maybe space them a little farther apart, but really they're going to be in here just for a few months. And if I see them trying to take off, or if I feel like they're struggling having 2 in the same pot, I can always divide them later, you know, during the winter. But for now, this will be good. Now I'm going to water these all before I take them into the grow room. But I did pre-moisten the soil. If I had been smart, what I would have done is filled all my pots with soil and thoroughly watered them all a couple hours before I did this. But really, there's no right or wrong way to do it. So as long as you get some water on them before too long has passed, as in before, you know, I wouldn't wait till tomorrow. I'm going to do this before I take them in the house. Let them drain a little bit and then take them in, and they'll be good to go. Nothing to it. I have finished for the day. I've got 75 of the lavenders transplanted, most of them 2 to a pot, but the bigger ones 1 to a pot. And I've got, therefore, 45 of the smaller ones left. Well, small to medium. Some of those are still good size. And I'm going to plant those, most of those in a big crate on the back patio, which is covered, and they should be, well, that will give them a somewhat warmer, sheltered environment compared to out in the open, although not as sheltered, warm, and protected as in the grow room. But other than that big crate, probably I'll put about, I'm guessing, 20 to 25 in there, and then another 20 in pots in the backyard. I just need to get some more soil and some more pots. But I'm really pleased. This went really quick. This only took me about 20 minutes to pot these up. So combined with the 10 minutes to dig them up from this little spot here, that was only a half an hour of work. Now I'm going to go get my wagon and lug these to the back and take some in the grow room and some onto the patio and put these in the crate. So it'll probably be another 15 minutes to 20 minutes of work, and I'll have 120 Spanish lavender transplant. And I'm really pleased about that. So thanks for joining me today. If you like easy gardening ideas like this one, and you can't get much easier than transplanting volunteer seedlings, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel, because I offer videos like this twice a week. And I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned It is so easy to take advantage of nature and its gifts to us, like these lavender plants that just came up from seeds dropped by a mother plant. And I bet if you look around your place, you'll find some volunteer seedlings of some sort or another too. Have a great week, everyone.
This is back in March again. These are 2 lavender plants that were cuttings from the mother plant. Not seedlings, but cuttings, and they've done very well too.